to spend 10 minutes just talking about the Open Doors Initiative, what we do, why we do it, the impacts that we want to have in the world, and what this is all about, really, and just a recap of where we're at. And then I'll pass over to Jeanne McDonagh, who's the CEO of the Open Doors Initiative. And Jeanne will walk through and kind of pull out some of the highlights from the annual report and some of the numbers, etc. And she'll take maybe 10 minutes to do that. And then Jeanne will hand over to Tiernan Brady, who is the Global Director of Inclusion at Clifford Chance. And Tiernan is going to talk to why this all makes sense through the lens of an employer. And then I think we'll hand back to Jeanne and close. So it should take approximately a half an hour. So we'll be done by in or around 11 o'clock. So without further ado, I'll get going. You know, again, you'll mostly know this, but the Open Doors Initiative works with industry, with government, and with NGOs to create pathways to employment for marginalized groups. We work with people basically who need our help, and we work with them to help get them on the road to employment. And in Ireland today, these three groups, which I'll talk about in a second, face higher barriers to employment than most of us and most other people. And people with, just to give you some stats, people with disabilities are more than twice as likely to be unemployed. Refugees and asylum seekers in Ireland may have been given the right to work, but they're unable to access the training and the experience that they really need oftentimes. And then the long-term unemployment rate amongst under 25s is twice the national average. So the numbers would say that those three groups face higher barriers to employment than most other groups. And back in September 2018, 14 Irish employers came together with a plan to support people from these three groups in Irish society, to support them into employment. And it came at the inspiration, I suppose, and the instigation of David Stanton, TD, the Minister of State for Integration and Equality. And it came out of a conversation with him where he was saying, wouldn't it be great if we could get some scale impact from industry and from business to have a big impact with those three groups, helping them into employment. And it grew from there. It's now grown to nearly 100 organizations, 100, fantastic, I must say. And that number keeps growing. The work continues to expand. Over the first year, the Open Doors Initiative opened the labour market, and Jeanne will talk about this, opened the labour market to over 2,300 people who have been unable to access the labour market prior to that. And those numbers, that 2,300 people, has now grown by over 600%, as we'll see in the figures later. So fantastic progress. And we're having, you know, year on year, a much bigger impact in the world, which is very exciting. But, you know, we shouldn't in any way be complacent. We're at the very beginning of our journey, as far as I'm concerned. More needs to be done. We're all experiencing the challenges faced by COVID-19 and the knock-on implications for the Irish economy. We're seeing the global uncertainty and how disrupted life and business has become. And in times of like this, times of recession, tough times, etc., actually diversity and inclusion is needed even more. And maybe it's at risk even more, but it's needed even more. So with the vision and the drive and the determination of everyone who's joined this group to date and beyond, we want to create more supports, more education, more training programs, more internships, more jobs, and more entrepreneurs. And we want to help people to find their place in Irish society and make it better for them and make it better for all of Irish society as a result. To make this happen, we've got to amplify the success to date so that we can help even more people. We've got to reduce the barriers to employment and create supports for people who need assistance. You know, and we want more company CEOs to involve their organizations in Open Doors and make the Irish workforce a more inclusive space for people across Irish society. This year, we commissioned a piece of research by Professor Tom Cooney of TU Dublin into the barriers and the supports to the employment of marginalised people. Great piece of research, and it signposts the areas in which we can have the most impact and makes recommendations on how we best approach it as business leaders, as NGOs, as government. And it's vital that these are ingrained in the way that we work, in the way that we attract and retain people, as well as helping those who fall outside the employment net. To drive real change within our workplaces, we need to look for those, we need to actively seek out those with different backgrounds, different abilities, different experiences, and that will make our businesses better, more creative, better equipped to think laterally and become more resilient and find better solutions to problems, etc. It's a real positive, and we need to actively look for that and bring that into our world and our businesses, etc. And I think, yeah, we'll make our companies, our organizations, better places to work with more enjoyable experiences for everybody. We've seen that employees become even more engaged and even prouder of where they work as a result of being connected into this world, into the work of Open Doors. So it can have a very positive impact on employee engagement, and therefore, that means that companies will perform better, organizations will perform better, and then they'll have more sustainable futures. So you get into a very positive cycle. So, I mean, obviously change doesn't happen overnight. It requires lots of long-term proactive planning. It requires leadership. It means bringing the entire workforce on the journey, and it leads to better workplaces, as I've said, better outputs, better bottom lines, and a better society. So, it really works across the board. Everyone benefits. And again, just to say, shouldn't even have to say it, but it's not box ticking. This is just inclusion. It's just including people. So that's not box ticking. That's just obvious. And people can see a company's truly held values. They can see through it. They can see through lip service. And when it is really at the core of a business and some kind of truly held values, people can see that, and it makes them prouder. So, and I think the other thing to remember is that this is not just for good times. This is for the bad times. This is for the good times. It's for recession. It's for boom. It's for always. As I say, it's just obvious. It's just inclusion. It should be a given. And I think this mindset is needed more than ever, particularly with COVID and the restrictions that COVID brings, etc. We need more government support to do this. We're delighted to work with a number of departments on an ongoing basis to these aims, and we want to do more of that. So, so much done and so much more to do. And as I say, I think we're at the beginning of the journey, and it's been a very strong start, but there's so much more that we want to do and that we can do. And look, I just wanted to thank all of you for your continued efforts and encourage you and your companies and your organizations to do even more to increase the brilliant, impactful work and to attain the goals that are set out in the annual report. And obviously Open Doors Initiative and Jeanne and the team, we will do everything that we possibly can to support you every step along the way. So I hope that's a helpful kind of refresher on Open Doors Initiative, on why we're doing what we're doing, on the importance of it, the impact it can have in the world and on employees and in society. And with that, I suppose I'll hand over to Jeanne to take us through some of the progress that we have made in the last 12 months. So Jeanne, over to you.
So just to say, in our work over the last year, everyone, companies, employees, job seekers, have faced daily struggles to maintain life as usual, and none more so than our participants. There's been disengagement, particularly amongst youth from disadvantaged backgrounds, who are pulling away from their usual supports for a variety of reasons. And we've tried to overcome these challenges by innovative practices, programs and training, all in an online environment. We've helped people into further education, skills programs and jobs, despite the dramatic drop in employment levels. This has shown itself throughout the year with many programs arising and knowledge shared, and we continue to grow the ethos as we all have the same North Star to help people from marginalised backgrounds into employment. Last March 12th, we started our journey as a standalone organisation, and I'll now run through a summary of some of the progress we've made in that year. So we engaged with through both the companies and Open Doors itself with over 14,754 participants during the year, despite COVID and the restrictions that placed. The impact this has had on people's lives cannot be underestimated. Here is just a small selection of some feedback from people who took part in various projects and courses, and the difference it has made to them and the change it has made to their working lives. Open Doors runs a number of projects throughout the year, and we're constantly innovating. Here are some of the key ventures we started last year and are developing to increase employment in a diverse and inclusive way. We spoke at many events and seminars to talk about our work and to bring on new partners. We also engage with people, both company employees and participants directly, through podcasts and seminars, with speakers covering a wide range of relevant topics. They're all on our website as evergreen content that people can pick up when needed or when they feel like dipping into a particular topic. We were also invited to join a range of task forces and committees which are furthering our aims and working in a collaborative way with a wider range of people. We use research by academic bodies as a basis for all our work. We also take part in other research and send submissions to government to increase inclusivity and employment opportunities for people in all that they do as governance. It is vital that our work is measured, and we are delighted that Infuse from the National College of Ireland helped to gather our results across the companies and produce the final metrics. It was great to have a specialist group collate the figures and check them independently to verify our work. We measure inputs, outputs, and outcomes, as well as qualitative metrics, some of which you'll see now. So our work has increased, as Ali said, by over 600%, from 2,300 people helped last year to over 14,700 in the year just gone. This is a testimony to the companies who are even more fully engaged in inclusive work during a difficult period for them, and proved that inclusivity is even more important in an economic downturn and a time of high unemployment. It shows that diversity and inclusion is a long-term goal, and speaking for myself and for all of our team, we are really, really delighted with these figures. Our metrics increased greatly in all the areas we covered. Some of the figures shown here are a startling and positive example of where businesses come forward to help those in need. Not all of the participants go to work directly for the business that helps them, but make progress onto other education or training or jobs. And so this is very inclusive and selfless work on behalf of all who take part. And again, we are really delighted with these figures. The range and breadth of the programs carried out by the companies was really inspiring and met the needs of all our groups in seeking pathways to employment. There are many more examples we can show, so here's just a selection of some of the work being done. Overall, we are proud to highlight the achievements of last year and look forward to even greater results next year and increased engagement from all our partners. Thank you so much for all your work and help throughout the year, and we look forward to working with you into the future. A copy of the full annual report will be sent to all of you and is available on our website now. Just before we finish up, I'd like to take a moment to thank Oliver Loomes, our chair, for his stellar leadership since the inception of the Open Doors initiative. He has been a powerful guiding hand and given immense time and great counsel to the work. We will really miss him as he steps down and wish him the absolute best in his future path. And we look forward to working with you into the future. We are now honoured to have Tiernan Brady, Global Director of Inclusion in Clifford Chance, join us to share his experience of why business needs to be inclusive. Tiernan was Political Director in the Irish marriage referendum for Yes and led the successful Australian campaign for marriage, which allowed same-sex couples equal rights. Tiernan, you're very welcome this morning.
Hi, Jeanne. Hi, Jeanne. Thanks, Jeanne. Thanks, Oliver. Hi, everybody. We've only got a little bit running up to the top of the hour, and I was thinking about, well, what's useful? Because I think Oliver, has gone through how important inclusion is in general, and an awful lot of the different aspects of why it matters. But I wanted to try and give one or two thoughts that I think are definitely going to only grow. The first thing is we all have seen, and we can all see in real time, how much inclusion has shot up through the priority lists of every company everywhere. And this is a pretty startling phenomenon in terms of the rate of change and how much it's gone up. That trend isn't going to slow down. It's only going to increase. To be honest, I think that's only a good thing, and more power to it. But as businesses, we need to be aware of that. There is going to be no slowdown. And whilst a lot of that has been triggered by events, the next phase of that will be our own people, our customers, our clients, our suppliers, and broader society, asking us to update them and follow up on what we've done through these events. So as we've seen this year, last year now, with Black Lives Matters, we've seen with events right across the globe, how much of a spotlight was shone on inclusion, and how much businesses were expected to stand up and take a stand. The next phase of that is going to be proving, well, what did you do? We've seen all this incredible noise, and we've seen all these loud commitments, and now people have to live them, prove them, and there's going to be an accountability phase to this. And I think in a way that was one of the things I thought might be useful. We think about this, and we should think about this as a permanent campaign, because inclusion has a goal, but there's no finish line. There is going to be no day where you all get to go, well, that was fantastic, we'll all go home, we're all equal. That's not how inclusion works. Inclusion is building a permanent culture. It's about who we are every day. It's about what we do in our firms, with our clients, and with the world every day. And that means even if you manage to get to a certain level, then you have to actually spend the rest of your life defending and championing that. It's not going to suddenly go permanently sustain itself. So I think one of the things that I wanted to say today was to try and think about, how do we think about this as a permanent campaign? How do we shift our mindsets in businesses to go, this is more than metrics. This needs to be sustained by mobilizing and activating and empowering people to become campaigners in their own space. And I think what's really important about that, I suppose, is, what kind of a campaign does that look like? And, it's easy because sometimes when we think about campaigns, we think about political campaigns. And they all have winners and they all have losers. That's not what this campaign has to be. And we have to mind that as businesses, as we look out our window and see the tone and the polarization of the world all going in only one direction. We have to realize that campaigning for us, delivering cultural change for us, isn't about creating a set of winners and losers. It's about persuading everybody. And that doesn't mean you're going to get to persuade everybody, but it means your positioning, your will, your goal has to be to persuade everybody. How do we engage and continuously educate, raise awareness, and, as we say, inspire and empower? And I think as businesses, it's really important for us for multiple reasons. One, because it's a value, as Oliver has said, this is a really important value for society. Two, I think if we're not taking charge of it, then the culture in our firms is going to look like a culture that someone else designed outside our firms. It will seep in through our building. our buildings. So we have to mind that. But, you know, the idea that culture is just going to build itself, you know, it isn't true. So I think both in terms of self-interest, firms have to lead on inclusion, or else you're going to find yourself working in a culture that you had no role in building and are not in control of, and potentially one that is polarized, divisive, and does lasting damage to the experiences that people are having in your firm. So I think thinking about that as a permanent campaign, and as one that's a permanent campaign about persuasion, that there is, you know, no day where we're going to finish this, and there are no bad guys. There are only people we have yet to talk to and engage and persuade. And I think once we frame something like that, then you start to build initiatives like Jeanne's and and everything in open doors, but also internally as well, that really inspire and start to create the change you're looking for. I think the thing I was thinking that might be useful as well is the mindset shift that I think business has to have on this one. Is when we think about our values, we tend to instinctively think about the cost of them. And that's a natural habit. We've done it for probably centuries. And I think that's the bit that as firms we have to flip on its head. We have to think about the cost of not having them. What do we pay for deciding to bypass our values? And I was going to give you a story from Australia about this one to give you an example, a tale of two firms. All of this is on the public record, so we're not telling any tales. One is about a Qantas, the national airline, run by an Irishman called Alan Joyce. And he made a conscious decision to double down on his values and campaigning for equality and financially supporting organizations that were campaigning for equality. He knew there was a cost to that. And there was. He got a lot of stick. He got a lot of political stick. Members of the cabinet singled him out for abuse about, you know, politicizing Qantas. But he didn't give in. He stuck his heels in. And despite all the abuse and having been attacked once because of his position, and all very powerful people trying to marginalize him because of his position, he held firm and emerged in Australia as a national icon. Not bad for an Irish fella, but emerged as a national icon because of the values. So he knew there was a cost, but he was prepared to pay it, and he knew there was a cost to not doing it. On the flip side, then another firm, which was a telecommunications firm, did the opposite. They decided that actually values are only worth having when times are good. So they had endorsed the marriage campaign in Australia, but then they got a letter from one of their big clients, the Archbishop of Sydney, who basically said, we see that you've endorsed marriage equality. We're going to review our account if you don't review your position on marriage equality. So they instantly looked at the cost of having values and they folded. And what they did was they said, okay, and they wrote back to the Archbishop and said, we're not going to campaign. Unsurprisingly, the letter leaked. Who would have known that happened? And they crashed onto the news for all the wrong reasons. Over a period of about 7 days, they bleeded customers as people cancelled their accounts and set up with other mobile networks. Their internal staff networks were enraged and started to really, you know, voice their opinion within the firm and demand to know what management was doing. Management then tried to ameliorate the position by having a halfway house. And they said, well, we're for marriage, but we won't campaign. And of course, that didn't work either. By day 7, having trended and been a national news story and having lost thousands of accounts and millions of dollars, plus countless amounts in reputational damage, they totally reversed their position and ended up saying we're for marriage equality and we're going to campaign for it. They were only interested at that moment of measuring the cost of values instead of measuring the cost of not having them. And I think the mind shift that I think our businesses have to do is that one. We have to start thinking about what is the cost of not having inclusion at the heart of how we think all the time. Because in the end, inclusion is who we are every day, how we treat people every day, and how we expect to be treated every day, which means that has to be in the core of our functioning every day, our thought processes, how we engage with others. And the great thing is everybody will notice when it's not. And Oliver touched on this, you know, we hire really smart people, and it turns out they don't stop being smart the day they start work for us, which is great, but it means they can tell the difference between good PR and actually something that is an intrinsic core value that drives change. You know, I'm, you know, we're in the middle of Pride, as you can see behind me here, but, you know, it's such a good example. Pride, International Women's Day, Black History Month, you know, inclusion can sometimes feel like this My Little Pony that gets pulled down from the bedroom shelf and shaked about for special events and go, here's my Little Pony. It's really cool. Do you like it? And then it gets put back up. And if that is the level of commitments firms give to inclusion, the really smart people that they hire, which is other people, will notice that. They can tell the difference when something is a core value and when something is a t-shirt. So I think making sure that through supporting organizations like Open Doors, but also through the initiatives we run permanently in our firms, we have to be aware that people can tell whether we really mean this. And I think, you know, I know it's been mentioned, you know, we think about this year going, well, this was a challenging year, and you're going, yeah. And this is one of those moments when we really prove our values. Because if our values are luxury items, then we put them in the drawer when times are challenging. And everybody sees that. And the firms that choose to do that will have done themselves reputational damage both internally and externally. Their own people will see that that's happened. And you spend years building up a reputation for being committed to a value, and it disappears in seconds if you abuse that trust and that reputation. And so I think over the last year, we'll really have seen that. And I think as we emerge from lockdowns and pandemics, you know, we'll see again the firms that are really continue to put this at the heart of what they do. You know, there's a little bit, I do think, and it's the only self-interested bit I'd say for firms as well, is, you know, the job for life disappeared about God knows when, 40 years ago. And I think a lot of people probably thought, wow, you know, employees are going to have no power now. The entire power is going to shift to employers. I don't think that's what happened at all. I actually think employees became quite powerful because once you realize you're not going to be somewhere for 45 years and do your 9 to 5 and get a carriage clock and a dinner dance at the end and thanks very much, goodbye now. Once you realize that's not your career, then that changes how you think about your career. You know, once you realize you're probably going to have multiple jobs and multiple roles in multiple places, potentially multiple continents, then you become discerning about where you want to work. And that's only going to increase. You can see that in real time, that trend increasing all the time. People deciding where they want to go and people leaving because they don't want to be somewhere that doesn't match their values. So this should be both a core value. This should be something that we take this great mind shift to go, I want to think about this on the basis of what's the cost of not having values rather than the cost of having them. And also it's an absolute economic imperative. You know, so there's so many different reasons to come to the party on inclusion, and it doesn't really matter which reason you come to the party for, as long as people come to the party. And I think, you know, this year has been a record year for inclusion. Next year we'll only see that grow. And I think the work that you're doing to support organizations like Open Doors is precisely the type of value demonstration, you know, that's essential, both for changing society and changing the culture within our firms. And well done. Most importantly than anything, well done and thank you for doing that. I know this is a fantastic organization. And as you live your values as firms, this is a good place to invest. I know that. So in a very shortened version of what would be traditionally a very long speech, as we try to be respectful of people's time, I'm going to hand you back to Jeanne. And thank you so much, Jeanne, for having us today.
Thank you so much, Tiernan. And I love the idea of a permanent campaign. We may steal that as our motto. I love it. I think it's a great idea. And also that there is a cost to values. And I think it was all very pertinent what Tiernan said. And just to wrap up, I'd like to thank our speakers, Oliver and Tiernan, for the really insightful words and for being here this morning. I'd really like to thank the companies and the supporting partners who work with us on a daily basis. Without you, none of this is possible. And your work is only to be applauded, as those figures show. And let's do more of it. We're really looking forward to the future. A big shout out to the participants. They're the reason we're all here. They're the reason why we do the work we do, and they're magic, and they're growing, and they're getting better and better. And we really hope that everything we do helps them in some way and helps them grow and increase their ability to get work. And just finally, I'd like to thank the team at Open Doors Initiative who create all the magic. They're brilliant, they're fantastic people. We're growing bit by bit, and there's a lot more coming out in the future that we look forward to sharing with you this time next year or over the course of the year. But thank you to all of you. You're brilliant, and we wouldn't be where we are without you.